Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a video that I thought I was going to be making anytime soon because, I mean, let's be real. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has been out for a little while now, and the conversation has basically dwindled a little bit. I didn't think gaming urinalists were going to try to make more virtue signal pieces on it, and yet that's exactly what we have. So we have an article here from a website called Dual Shockers that says, I'd love a black Final Fantasy character that isn't just comic relief. Barrett and Saz are awesome, but I'm ready for someone a bit different. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, according to Jervon Perkins, and if you're wondering who that is, I mean, is it obvious at this point? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's another gaming tourist. According to this tourist, Barrett is a comedic character in Final Fantasy VII and nothing more.
You got a problem with that?
Do I have a problem with that? Oh, you can bet.
So let's get into this article, guys, from Dual Shockers. But of course, before we do, if you are new here, just consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. And like the video to push us out into that YouTube algorithm. Now, the conversation that's about to happen from Mr. or Mrs., whatever you want to call himself, Jervon, is going to be a very typical one. It's exactly what you would expect from a tourist in the gaming scene who is using it to push their identity activism, to push their identity politics, all that stuff. Like, they're not in here to actually play video games. They're in here to talk about how gay they are. They're in here to talk about how representation matters. They're in here to talk about how black they are. That is what's important to them, and that's basically the story that they want to tell. It says representation matters in Final Fantasy, with characters like Barrett and Saz proving complexity and depth beyond stereotypes. Now, even this part right here, this first part right here literally contradicts the headline of this article and showcases that Barrett and Saz are actually well fleshed out characters. There's nobody that I know of that has an issue with Barrett. A lot of people think Barrett is a fantastic character, myself included. I've always been a fan of Barrett. I don't see any reason why this would be considered bad representation, and I don't see why anybody who's black may think that this is a terrible idea of a black character to showcase. He is a masculine character, something that is very little to and far between these days. Very masculine, very out there, very funny. And not only that, aside from being funny, he has very serious moments of actual fatherhood and protection within the group. He is also the adoptive father of Marlene. He literally takes care of another man's child because of his reasons, obviously, if you guys played the game. Now, the funny thing is, I think it's interesting how they have an issue with Barrett, who upholds all of these values, right? Masculine, great father figure, and happens to be funny. You got a problem with him. But when you ask for actual representation, what kind of representation do you want? Because if you want to be serious, how good of a representation can we really get before it gets a little bit too real for you? A lot of these people would call those stereotypical representation. So if you can't go real, and if you can't go actual positivity, what kind of representation do you want? Then it says both Barrett and Saz, while initially serving as a comic relief, evolve into father figures with emotional depth and impactful storylines. Barrett doesn't start off as comic relief. I don't understand where he gets this from. Barrett has his comedic moments in the same way that Cloud has his comedic moments. If you want to be real, if you really want to be real, for those of you who played Final Fantasy VII, whether the old one or the new one, Cloud actually gets made fun of more than Barrett. Cloud actually ends up being used as comic relief more than Barrett. So where's your argument here? I don't understand. Then it says it's time for Final Fantasy to introduce a new type of black protagonist, one who defies stereotypical portrayals. Final Fantasy as a franchise has a short list of black main cast members. Within this mainline series, they are both Barrett Wallace from Final Fantasy VII and Saz Catsroy from Final Fantasy XIII Trilogy. While as a black gamer, I've enjoyed their inclusion within the series, it's time for us to get a black character that doesn't fall into the same comic relief archetype. Now, two things, ladies and gentlemen. Number one, you just had to throw in that you're a black gamer, right? You couldn't throw in the fact that you're just a gamer. You have to constantly use your race, your sexual identity, and all this stuff as a means to have a discussion. You couldn't just say, yeah, as a gamer, I want XYZ. No. You have to throw in as a black gamer, because that's apparently the most important thing for someone to know about you. So that's funny, number one. Number two, you want to talk about a short list of black main cast members, but in all actuality, Final Fantasy has been extremely diverse, not just for black people, but for many different people. And it even has even further diversity in some of its outings. When you want to talk about creatures that are humanoid and whatnot, you have an actual diverse cast of members in most of these games, and you have a problem with it. Why? Because some of them aren't so stereotypically black. It's just weird. You say you're against stereotypical black characters, and yet you get mad when there are not stereotypical black characters to be present for you to say, yes, that character's for me, right? That character's for me. And you want to talk about how you've enjoyed their inclusion, right? Their inclusion in the series. How about you enjoy what the characters actually are for, other than just inclusion? I was first introduced to Barrett when I played Final Fantasy VII back in 2002. I highly doubt that. It wasn't my first Final Fantasy. That award belongs to Final Fantasy VIII, and I was getting my footing with the RPG world. Within the original game, I found Barrett to be quite hilarious and a great counterpart to the stoic Cloud. While Cloud spent most of his earlier screen time keeping his feelings on the inside and being an unreliable narrator, Barrett spent his time calling Cloud out on his nonsense. He acted as a loud, brash reminder that the world was dying and Cloud and the gang needed to get their act together or things were going to go bad from worse. Not bad to worse, I'm sorry. Now, again, you obviously must not have fully played the game if you don't realize that, yes, Cloud is obviously stoic, but Cloud was forced to dress up as a woman. Cloud was forced to witness the whole LGBTQ dance scene in the Honeybee Inn. Cloud was the one that ends up getting made fun of by most of the cast members, and they even make fun of the fact that he's stoic. They say he's too much of a hard ass and whatnot, and they end up breaking him out of his shell towards the end. But it is a good character development, and that's why I find it interesting that you think Barrett's a comic release, because I think Barrett is the one that holds the group down. Barrett is the father figure of the group. Barrett is an actual father figure to Marlene. Barrett is the one that actually brings that masculine energy that is missing from a lot of these characters normally in these games. Not talking about Final Fantasy because, obviously it's Eastern, but still, you have these characters that are usually missing this masculine energy. Barrett brings that all and then some, and yet you still have a problem with it. And you even have to admit that he's a great character ultimately, which is why this entire article is nonsense. Many times he was the butt of jokes, so was Cloud, reacting to situations in loud and overreactive ways. The cast members chuckled as Barrett was once again being Barrett and getting impatient because there was yet another obstacle placed within their path. Many of these characteristics translated to the remake trilogy, and he was easily one of my favorites within the cast. I was looking forward to seeing a high-definition version of him in his sailor suit, and I was not let down. Why am I not surprised that you were looking forward to seeing him in an HD version of a sailor suit? Why am I not surprised by that statement? It says, watching him mention how natural and comforting the ridiculous attire was for him. That isn't to say that Barrett is a one-trick pony. What started off as the party's archetypical comic relief began to show more depth as the narrative thickened. This is especially apparent with Rebirth, where he's given multiple quieter moments, contemplating what will come next and hoping that Marlene, the center of his world, is okay. Not to mention he's faced with his regrets in the form of Marlene's birth dad, Dine, that usually brash and tough as nails character crumbles and bursts into tears as Dine passes away. Now, if anybody played the original Final Fantasy VII, you would realize that even after Dine ends up offing himself off of a cliff, Barrett completely breaks down, has an emotional scene, cries it out, screams no, and he just eventually has to man up and move on. That's basically what it is. It's not to, and it's interesting, they say that this isn't to say that Barrett is a one-trick pony. He's not. They openly admit here in this article that you're trying to say you don't like this representation. He is saying that Barrett is a great, well-developed character that is not a one-trick pony, that is not filled with a bunch of stereotypes. This character should check every single box that most black people say they want in terms of representation in video games, and yet you are still writing an article talking about how you want to move on to something different. You want to move on to something that's more quiet, more dark and mysterious and whatnot. I don't know what you want, but ultimately I do know that the more we try to give you what you say you want, the more unhappy you're going to be and the more unhappy we're going to be, because there's no pleasing people like this, ladies and gentlemen. There is no pleasing someone who will constantly change their identity 24/7, who wears rainbow wristbands, who wears a watch in the color of trans colors. there is no pleasing this person. So if you're looking for diversity in Final Fantasy, if you're playing Final Fantasy 7 and the first thing on your mind is representation, you are not a real gamer. You are a tourist. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.
You magnificent son of a bitch!